you need to be tracking your finances if you want to achieve financial independence. But some things that you're going to track are going to be more important than others. And that's why in this video, I'm going to share with you very important financial metrics that you need to be tracking. And make sure you stay to the end because I'm going to show you how you can do all this tracking, all this financial tracking, pretty much effortlessly and automatically. The very first financial metric that I want to mention here is tracking your performance of your investments versus the overall broad stock market. So more specifically, how your investments perform in relation to, let's say, the S&P 500. Now this is really important to track, especially if you're not investing directly and only in like a total US stock market fund. You might be investing, a little bit of your money into international funds. You might have a little bit of your money invested in bonds. You might have a little bit of your money invested in REITs or real estate investment trusts. Whatever you're investing in, it's really important to compare your portfolio performance to the overall US stock market. Because if over the long term, if your portfolio isn't performing as well as the broad stock market, then maybe that's not going to be good for your particular goals. Maybe you want to perform better, even though maybe it takes on a little bit more risk compared to what your current portfolio is, or whatever the case may be. So it's really important to track how your portfolio is doing in relation to the broad stock market. And especially if you pick some individual stocks within your portfolio. You don't want to be putting in all that work and have it for nothing if the overall broad stock market is just outperforming you anyway. And fun fact here, pretty recently in 2016, the S&P 500, it returned about 12.25%. Do you know how well your portfolio did in 2016? Because if you don't, then you're not properly tracking this financial metric. 12.25%, I really wish it returned that every single year. That's a really great return. And make sure that you stay to the end because I'm going to show you how you can track your performance versus the S&P 500. But first, let's move on to financial metric number 2. And financial metric number 2 is talked about all the time, but that's because it's super important, and that is your asset allocation. It's important to know how much of your money is invested in whatever it may be. How much do you have invested in stocks? How much do you have invested in bonds? How much do you have invested in alternatives such as real estate? It's really important to know where, pretty much at all times, where your money is invested. Your goal may be for, say, I want to invest 75% in stocks and 25% in bonds. Or your goal might be, I want to invest 60% in stocks, I want to invest 20% in bonds, and I want to invest 20% in real estate. Whatever it may be, as long as it adds up to 100, you probably have an asset allocation goal. And you need to be tracking what your asset allocation is, because if it gets too far out of whack, that means you're going to need to rebalance. And that's why not only should you be tracking your asset allocation, but I believe that everyone should have pretty much like a written plan of what they want their asset allocation to be. So that can't just change or you don't forget, wait, what was I trying to do with my asset allocation? So what I personally do is I just keep a document on my Google Drive, use that for everything. I keep a little Google document on there and I have some of my financial rules. And one of my financial rules is my asset allocation. So whatever my target asset allocation is, I have it written down there. And so if I ever go and look at stuff and I'm like, what was I supposed to be doing? What was I supposed to have in my asset allocation? I can just go back to that document and look at it and see, oh yeah, that was my plan. So currently, for example, my plan involves 0% bonds and 100% stocks. But within those 100% stocks, it's going to be allocated differently between US stock and international stock. So that's my current portfolio strategy. Me personally, I invest in the total US stock market and the total international stock market to varying degrees. And so I need to know what my asset allocation is. And if something crazy happens, recently we did have something crazy happen where your asset allocation might be crazy out of whack. And that might be a really good time to rebalance whenever the markets are doing something crazy out there. So it's really important to know your asset allocation. For example, here, let me put up on the screen for you really popular asset allocation portfolios. This is just an example of a 60-40, what it might look like if you were doing 60% stocks and 40% bonds. Now, number 3 of what you really need to track is also always talked about in financial independence, and that's because it is basically like the bread and butter of what financial independence means. You need to be tracking this one metric. But before I move on to that, if you're liking this video so far, please make sure that you like it and give it a thumbs up. It really does help me out, and I really do appreciate that. Just by hitting that like button, you're going to let the YouTube algorithm know that you want to spread this message to other people so that they can see it. Because believe me, they definitely need to see it. So thank you so much for hitting that like button. Now let's move on to number 3. And financial metric number 3 is going to be your net worth. Now there's lots of crazy nuances that go along with calculating your net worth. Some people take, the value of their plants and include that into their net worth. The value of everything they own. While technically that might be correct, technically your net worth is the value of every single thing you own. It's just impractical in order to, calculate all of that of everything you own. It's impractical to know the actual value of all the things you own. So when we're talking about net worth for financial independence, we're going to be specifically talking about your major assets. Of course, all the money that you have in your retirement accounts and in your investment accounts, your savings accounts, and things like that. Things that are obviously very easy to track because they actually have the numbers attached to them. At that point in time, that is what they are worth. Now, some people like to include the value of their car. I think that's a really good thing to include as well. You have to be honest there, and that's why I like to use Kelley Blue Book in order to estimate the value of the car. But for financial independence, still, if you don't plan on selling the car, then the value of that car doesn't really matter. It's kind of the same thing with your house. Now, of course, you should include the value of your equity, like of your house, in your net worth, in my opinion, but I don't think that's going to be applicable. The equity in your house isn't really applicable when calculating your financial independence goal. Because the way that you calculate your net worth, you would take all of your assets, the value of all your assets, and you subtract the value of your liabilities. So most of the time that is going to be your debts. So you're going to take the value of those assets minus the value of the debts, and that's going to be your net worth. But for very simple and automatic tracking, it's mostly just going to be applicable to track your investment net worth. So how much money that you have in investments and in cash. And thankfully, I have a tool for you. Make sure you stay to the end. That's going to do all of this automatically for you, because it is just your investment net worth that's going to be the most important on your path to financial independence. Another thing that is really important on your path to financial independence is tracking number 4. And number 4 is your income, because your income is going to be a very big factor in determining how fast you can achieve financial independence. Because even if you have just one job where you receive one W-2 every year, that's not going to be your total income. That's just going to be your earned income. Believe it or not, you probably have plenty of other income from other sources, whether you're actively trying to do that or not. You're probably going to have income in the form of dividends that are paid out in your taxable investment accounts. You might have other total income from interest that you put into your savings accounts or even in your checking account. So you're probably going to have other forms of income that you need to account for, and that's very important for determining what your savings rate is going to be for financial independence. And if you don't know your total income, then you're not going to know your proper savings rate. And that's why it's better to just consolidate all of your accounts on one platform in order to track your income correctly. And as an added benefit, knowing your actual total income, your proper total income, is going to make, when you go to file your taxes, it's going to make it extremely easy. So that's another benefit. Another financial metric that you definitely need to be tracking is on the opposite side of income, and that is your expenses. So you should always be tracking your expenses, whether you're actively trying to lower them or whether you're actively trying to keep a certain kind of budget or not. You should be tracking your expenses regardless. And it doesn't mean you have to, take out the pen and paper and write everything down every time you make a purchase. That would be crazy and take way too much time, especially depending on how often you're spending money, which is probably almost every day. Tracking your expenses should be effortless, just like it should be for all these financial metrics. Because when it comes to expenses, unfortunately, it's not that easy to say, I spend $2,000 per month or I spend $3,000 per month. It's usually not that, like that linear. It's not going to be that straight line. There's going to be some months where you spend a lot less, and there's going to be some months where you spend a lot more, because things happen and life is not exactly linear and predictable. And so it's better to get a longer term look at how much you're spending over the year, especially when you're trying to calculate your F.I.R.E number, especially when you're trying to, figure out how much you're going to need in retirement. It's much better to know what your long-term spending is, like how much you actually spend on average in one total year rather than on one particular month. And that's where you need to have everything linked up in one place. And the way that you can have this done effortlessly and automatically is through a tool called Personal Capital. Maybe you've heard me talk about Personal Capital, but if you yourself have not signed up for Personal Capital and at least tried it out, you really do need to do so. And you can do that by going to oncashflow.com/resources. Okay, and on that page, I have a link to Personal Capital. They are an affiliate of mine, which means that if you just click through there and if you just try their free online tool software, you don't have to pay any money. You just link up all your accounts. Just by doing that, you are going to help to support OnCashFlow, help me make better content for everyone. And I really do appreciate that. And of course, you're going to get plenty of benefits by getting access to tracking all of these financial metrics effortlessly and automatically. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm Zach from OnCashFlow.com, and I hope to see you next time.